Hundreds of Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh are undertaking hazardous journeys by boat to escape overcrowded living conditions in refugee camps. Many pay people smugglers to escape to Malaysia. Some make it, many don't. Some even end up in Indonesia after floating for months out in the open sea because no country will allow them entry. At least 1 million Rohingya live as refugees in Bangladesh. Most escaped a brutal military crackdown in their home, Myanmar, in 2017. And now their latest attempts at finding a place to call home have also been met with tragedy.
They'd been promised an escape to a better life. What they got was anything but. These images were filmed by one of the traffickers. He later abandoned the ship. A 19-year-old survivor pocketed the phone, a searing record of the abuse he too suffered. The Rakhine sailors came on the lower deck with sticks and fan belts and started beating us indiscriminately. The women went silent instantly, but the men kept resisting. They beat us mercilessly, bruising heads, ripping off ears, breaking hands. They wreaked havoc on us. Like many, Hassan wanted to escape the camp for Malaysia, where smugglers promised a bright future. Now he is back in his squalid home in a Bangladesh refugee camp, stuck with around 1 million others like him. Most of them had escaped a military crackdown in Myanmar in 2017, which UN investigators said amounted to genocide. They avoided death, but for many, their new life is one of misery. The Rohingya camps are very overcrowded. The smugglers are hunting potential victims every day. It's a multi-million-dollar trade and involves people from various sectors, including fishermen who want a slice of the proceeds, and even Rohingya refugees themselves. Some want to help families reunite. This is the husband of Juleha Begum. She was told she would take less than a week to meet him in Malaysia. Her failed journey turned into a nightmare. One day, my Sikh sister got into an argument with the smuggler when she was coming back from the toilet and slapped him in the face. The smuggler beat my Sikh sister with a leather belt. She bled to death. Still, stories like these aren't enough to scare off the desperate. Nearly 500 Rohingya Muslims crossed over to Malaysia this year. About 400 others landed in neighboring Indonesia. But many more failed, returning home with horror stories to tell, or died at sea before they could.
And Phil Robertson is a Deputy Asia Director at Human Rights Watch. He joins me now from Bangkok. Phil, is enough being done to prevent the smuggling of an already persecuted people?
Well, quite clearly not. In fact, these are syndicates that have been operating for a very long time with the primary aim to send Rohingya to Malaysia. They have been changing their tactics as needed depending on the sort of enforcement they see in places like Thailand or Malaysia. But the bottom line is that Rohingya are subjected to horrible conditions. Open boats with limited food and water, exposed to the elements, highly unsanitary, and facing beatings and sexual harassment from the men who are supposed to deliver them to a new country.
This kind of smuggling is not new, Phil. Why isn't any action being taken?
Well, I think you have almost a game of whack-a-mole where you have various different crackdowns in some places and the traffickers pop up in another place. The reality is that there's a great deal of desperation in the camps. There are almost no opportunities for people there. And they see the possibility of getting to Malaysia as being the promised land. And many families are willing to mortgage whatever money and resources they have in the camps to try to get one person to Malaysia who they expect will then be the person who will send back remittances and support the family into the future.
But Malaysia hardly appears to be the promised land when it comes to the actual practice of how the government is not accepting many of these people who arrive by boat. In fact, some of them are detained and others spend months out at sea, some of them even ending up in Indonesia. What does that say about the responsibility of nations like Malaysia and Indonesia?
Well, Malaysia should be accepting these people. They should be bringing them ashore. They should be treating them as refugees and allowing them to undergo refugee status determination by the UN Refugee Agency. And actually, before the last year or so, that was what Malaysia generally was doing. The situation changed during the COVID-19 pandemic, and also with a new government in Malaysia that has, frankly, used xenophobia as a point of reference in terms of its COVID-19 response. You know, the government of Muhyiddin Yassin, the prime minister, basically did nothing, as Rohingya have been increasingly targeted in Malaysia by various different hate speech campaigns. And it's very sad that Malaysia, which used to be one of the champions for the Rohingya, has really fallen back so far.
Let's just go back to Bangladesh, where most of these refugees begin their seaward journeys from. Is Bangladesh being able to manage nearly 1 million refugees single-handedly?
Bangladesh needs more support from the international community, and it's not getting it. That's a big problem. There's a certain degree of donor fatigue that needs to be recognized. Everybody is appreciative of the fact that Bangladesh received these people, that they opened the border and allowed them to come across. But now Bangladesh is increasingly taking a very hostile position towards the Rohingya. In some cases are trying to involuntarily move people to what is a de facto prison island, Basan Char. You know, they're trying to get the attention of the international community to focus pressure on the government in Myanmar. And I think that's a laudable goal. But unfortunately, they're using the Rohingya as a method to try to get the international community to act. And, you know, treating people badly to try to get more reaction from the international community is not the right way forward.
Speaking of Bhasanchar, this flood-prone island, refugees have already begun to be moved there. Do we have any initial reports as to how they're doing?
Well, there's over 1,600 of them there now. Many of them were duped into going and told that they might be at the head of a resettlement queue or would have livelihoods. There are a lot of people who are quite unhappy. You know, there's a real lack of livelihoods there. You know, Bangladesh has said that they're going to allow them to fish and farm on that island, but the actual groundwater is too salty for planting, and the fishing, they're not allowing these people to have their own boats because they would leave. So it's essentially become a de facto prison island, and that's a major problem. People are unhappy, and people have protested, and they've faced reprisals for that.
Phil Robertson, thank you very much for joining us on this. For some, though, the journey across the Bay of Bengal and the Andaman Sea can end in tragedy, but many are able to survive, like the family of Nema Shah.
It was earlier this year that Nema Shah held a funeral ceremony for his wife and daughter. They'd left Bangladesh in a rickety boat to join him in Malaysia, where he was working. But then he heard nothing from them.
When I worked in Malaysia, I used to save part of my salary. I sent money to my family every month. My wife saved the money to pay for the boat. She arranged the trip by herself, and she did it without discussing it with me.
He'd given them up for dead. But then, a miracle.
I saw on the news, on videos on the internet, that about 100 Rohingya landed here on a boat. Someone pointed out my wife and daughter to me in the images.
Nema's wife, Majuma, is here at the bottom left, holding her 6-year-old daughter.
When I saw them, I called my mother and my wife's mother and told them they were alive. That was the happiest day of my life.
The boat, carrying almost 100 Rohingya refugees from camps in Bangladesh, was towed to Indonesia's Sumatra island by locals. The refugees said they spent 4 horrific months at sea, surviving on rice, nuts and rainwater, and that at least one person died. From Malaysia, Shah was able to speak with his wife by phone. He quit his construction job and made his way illegally by boat to Indonesia. There, he snuck into the refugee camp and found his family.
I was only hoping to be happy and thinking about when I can live together with my husband again. Thank God he came here. I'm happy we're here together now.
But despite that stroke of fortune, conditions in the camp are tough. They only have this small space to call their own. Sometimes they buy nuts or small extras from local market sellers to supplement the food they're given.
I'm very happy to meet my husband here, but I feel sorry for my daughter when she wants to eat something and we can't give her anything because my husband has no income.
The lives of Nemar, Majuma and their daughter are governed by the rhythms of the camp, but also by economic forces and immigration laws over which they have no control. For now, they're living hand in hand, one day at a time.